I started thinking about the Roadside Memorial Project about 2.5 years ago. I was out doing a year-long fellowship at the Roswell Artist in Residence program in New Mexico, and had just started this project about bedside tables. So I was having friends send me pictures of their nightstands, and was interested in the way that these kind of intentional and accidental collections of objects would create these complicated portraits of people. So I was like hyper tuned into like assemblages in the wild, and we were taking a lot of road trips. My partner and I had just come from the city, and that's when I first started documenting roadside memorials. So I hadn't lost people in car accidents, but I have lost people close to me. So I spent a fair amount of time kind of thinking about how memory works. And as a visual artist, the idea of sort of using objects to create these sites that have this like kind of complicated function where it's both about a place for grief, but it's also a kind of celebration, and it's also got this layer which is like a memento mori, or a warning, or like a call for other people to drive safely. The kind of layers of that really spoke to me, and felt really urgent and like compelling. So I started researching more widely around like different types of roadside memorial practices when I'd gotten back to my studio in Brooklyn about a year later, and started looking into like the descansos in the Southwest and like secular organizations like Ghost Bikes and lots of different traditions in between, and that's when the project kicked into full gear. Scale has always been really important to my work. Growing up, I painted pretty small, but my heroes were people like Layla Ali or Hilary Harkness, or these sort of meticulous painters who'd make work that just kind of functioned like a black hole in a gallery. So like it didn't necessarily take up a lot of space, but it would just hold a wall and pull everything. You just see people like walking up and leaning in. I love that kind of intensity of focus. So then when I got to grad school and was doing work of like moderately varying scales, and would have a lot of people in my studio, I would notice and get really excited about the fact that these sort of small, tiny constellations of paintings that I was doing would command this kind of attention, or, you know, draw people in very close, and they would have this very intimate experience of viewing. So I really started to embrace that aspect of what scale can do. You know, scale is like kind of a tool for attention, which is no small thing, pun intended, in this sort of day and age of like lots of different fast, loud, big things like trying to command attention. So the idea of kind of using scale as a way to look at things that are often overlooked, that are kind of integral, important parts of our daily life, is for me one of the biggest reasons that I'm interested in the miniature.
So typically I start with a source material of photographs that either I've taken or someone has taken for me. This is an example of one of the bedside table photographs. All the materials that I work with tend to be paper, polymer clay, sometimes balsa wood, sometimes wire, sometimes fabric, and everything gets painted with gouache, which is like an opaque watercolor. This milk carton was made first from a piece of paper, and then I folded it, scored it, and painted it. This is my detail brush, so that's as small as brushes get for things like text. That probably took me, all told, about 3 or 4 hours. This little guy is made out of a combination of cotton, fabric, the eyes are polymer clay, thread, these little gummy worms also paint on polymer clay. I found through experimentation that honestly at this scale, less is more. So often I'm not after exact replication. It's about kind of picking out essential bits of information or capturing a certain textural quality, but definitely still letting the hand play a really important part in deciding what the object looks like, which is often a little wonky at the end of the day.
The body of cut paper paintings in the show all loosely have to do with the idea of memory, and are depictions of spaces for the negotiation of memory, and like what are the objects that are used to facilitate that dialogue or that kind of set the scene. So I was really thinking about the roadside memorials as kind of an anchor point in terms of being really these spaces where there's like a type of dialogue that happens between like present and absent, and what are some other spaces where that kind of conversation goes on, whether it's, you know, group therapy or it's like more absurd, like a more absurd take, like this idea of confrontation with the dead as taxidermy. For me, I've always loved about the cut paper that they have this architecture of shadow. So there's this sort of ambiguous space that happens, and I thought in particular for this body of work that, you know, memory is this idea, like the connotation of it being a shadow realm felt really appropriate with this work in particular. I'm excited to have a couple different projects coming up that are cooking. I'm going to be a tiny bit coy about it because often at this stage in the game, language for me is still like kind of vague and cheesy, and it's really not until I'm in the middle of the project that things get kind of more specific and interesting. But I will say, regarding the miniature sculpture, that I have been doing some research into time capsules and into the Heaven's Gate cult and into the idea of thresholds kind of more generally. And I'm excited to be exploring some mythological territory, some more fictional territory for the first time. And with my painted cut paper, I've been looking at a lot of almanacs and kind of ways of marking time through history, and also kind of thinking about waiting rooms generally. So excited to be exploring in those directions. Stay tuned.